What happens when royalty meets reality television and everything falls apart in front of millions of viewers? In just 38 seconds, one comment would turn a friendly chat into the most uncomfortable moment in talk show history. The studio lights were bright that evening. Jonathan Ross sat in his usual chair, ready for another night of entertainment and laughter. His guest was someone the entire country wanted to hear from. Meghan Markle walked onto the stage in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people earn in a year. The audience clapped. She smiled and waved like she was greeting her subjects. Jonathan stood up to shake her hand. "Welcome to the show. So lovely to have you here." Meghan sat down and crossed her legs, looking around the studio like she was inspecting it. "Thank you for having me. This is quite cozy." The way she said cozy made it sound like an insult. Jonathan laughed it off. He was good at that. Years of interviewing celebrities had taught him how to handle difficult guests. "So, you've had quite the journey," Jonathan began. "From acting to royalty to, well, everything that came after. How are you doing?" Meghan tilted her head. "I'm doing wonderfully, actually. Better than ever. Free from all the constraints and the negativity." "The public has been fascinated by your story," Jonathan continued. "There's been a lot of conversation about your time in the royal family." She cut him off. "Conversation? Is that what we're calling it? More like obsession. People need to move on." The audience went quiet. Jonathan shifted in his seat. "Well, I think people are just curious because they have nothing better to do with their lives," Meghan interrupted again. "I mean, really, Jonathan, don't you think the British public should focus on actual problems instead of what I'm doing?" Jonathan kept his smile, but you could see it was getting harder. "I suppose people are interested because you were part of something they care about. The royal family means a lot to many people here." Meghan laughed, but it wasn't a warm laugh. It was the kind of laugh that makes you uncomfortable. The royal family, right. An outdated institution that needs to modernize or disappear. The audience gasped. You could hear people shifting in their seats. Jonathan's eyebrows went up. "That's quite a strong statement." "It's the truth," Meghan said, leaning forward, "and I'm not afraid to say it anymore. I was silenced for too long." Jonathan tried to steer the conversation somewhere safer. "Let's talk about your new projects. You've been working on some exciting things in America." "Yes, because America actually appreciates talent and hard work," Meghan said. "Unlike here, where it's all about who your parents were and what title you have." "Well, Britain has its own way of doing things," Jonathan said carefully. "Tradition is important to a lot of people." Meghan rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes on national television. "Tradition is just another word for refusing to change. It's backwards thinking." "I think a lot of people would disagree with that," Jonathan said, maintaining his composure. "There's value in preserving history and culture." "Value?" Meghan scoffed. "What value is there in making people miserable? In forcing them into boxes they don't fit into?" "Nobody's forcing anyone," Jonathan replied. "These are choices that people make." "Easy for you to say," Meghan shot back. "You've never been trapped like I was." Jonathan leaned back in his chair. "Trapped is a strong word. You had the ability to leave at any time, which you eventually did." "After they made my life unbearable," Meghan said, her voice getting sharper. "After they drove me to the breaking point." "Who is they?" Jonathan asked. "You keep saying they like it some nameless villain." "The institution," Meghan said dramatically. "The people behind the scenes who pull the strings and make the rules." "Right," Jonathan said slowly. "And these people, did they ever speak to you directly? Or are we talking about feelings and interpretations?" Meghan's jaw tightened. "Are you saying I made it up?" "I'm not saying anything," Jonathan replied. "I'm asking questions. That's what I do." "You're questioning my truth," Meghan said, emphasizing the last word. "I'm questioning the story," Jonathan corrected. "There's a difference." The producer in the control room was probably having a heart attack. This was not going the way anyone had planned. Jonathan was a professional, though. He had dealt with worse. "You seem quite passionate about this," he said. "Of course I'm passionate," Meghan snapped. "I was treated terribly, and everyone just expected me to smile and take it." "I understand it was difficult," Jonathan said, his voice gentle, "but surely there were some good moments." "Good moments?" Meghan repeated. "Jonathan, do you know what it's like to have your every move criticized? Your every word twisted?" "Actually, yes," Jonathan said with a small smile. "I'm in television. Comes with the territory." Meghan didn't like that. You could see it in her face. "That's not the same thing at all. You chose this. I was thrown into it." "You did marry into the royal family," Jonathan pointed out, still keeping his tone light. "That was a choice." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you saying this is my fault?" No, Jonathan said quickly. "I'm just saying that certain things come with certain decisions." "Typical," Meghan said, shaking her head. "Blame the woman. Blame the outsider." "I'm not blaming anyone," Jonathan tried to explain. "I'm simply pointing out that when you marry into one of the most famous families in the world, there are going to be certain expectations and pressures." "Expectations?" Meghan's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Is that what we're calling racism and abuse now? Expectations?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. Jonathan cleared his throat. "I don't think anyone is defending racism or abuse, but you're making very serious accusations." "They're not accusations if they're true," Meghan snapped. "Then where's the proof?" Jonathan asked, his journalist instincts kicking in. "You've made a lot of claims, but where's the evidence?" "I lived it," Meghan said, pointing at herself. "I am the evidence." "Personal testimony is one thing," Jonathan said carefully. "But you're talking about an entire institution, about specific people. Don't they deserve the chance to defend themselves with specifics rather than vague allegations?" Meghan's face flushed. "This is unbelievable. You're actually defending them right now." "I'm not defending anyone," Jonathan said, his voice firm. "I'm asking for fairness, for both sides." The audience was completely silent now. Everyone could feel the tension. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. You wanted to look away, but you couldn't. Jonathan took a breath. "I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just trying to have a conversation." "A conversation?" Meghan's voice got louder. "This feels more like an interrogation. Are you working for the tabloids now, Jonathan?" "That's not fair," Jonathan said, and for the first time, his professional mask slipped a little. "I've asked you perfectly reasonable questions." "Reasonable?" Meghan stood up. "You're sitting here defending an institution that protected abusers and attackers while throwing me to the wolves." "I haven't defended anyone," Jonathan said firmly. "I've been nothing but respectful to you." "Respectful?" Meghan's voice went up another notch. "You've been condescending since I sat down. That little comment about choices? That was a dig." Jonathan stood up too. "It wasn't a dig. It was a statement of fact." "Oh, here we go with the facts," Meghan said mockingly. "You people love your facts when they suit you." "You people," Jonathan repeated. "Who exactly are you people?" "The British media, the establishment, all of you who protected that family while destroying me." "I'm a talk show host," Jonathan said, spreading his hands. "I interview celebrities and make people laugh. I'm not the establishment." "You're part of the system," Meghan insisted. "You prop it up with shows like this. You make them look good. I've had members of the royal family on this show exactly twice in 15 years, Jonathan said, and both times I asked them tough questions, so your theory doesn't really hold up." "You're twisting my words," Meghan complained. "I'm repeating your words back to you," Jonathan corrected. "If they sound twisted, maybe that's something to think about." Meghan pointed a finger at him. "See? There it is again. That condescending tone. Like you're so much smarter than me. I never said I was smarter than you, Jonathan replied, his voice level. But I have been doing this for a very long time, and I know when someone is deflecting instead of answering questions. I'm not deflecting, Meghan said loudly. I'm trying to explain something important, and you keep interrupting me with your gotcha questions. They're not gotcha questions, Jonathan said, his patience wearing thin. They're follow-up questions. That's how conversations work. You say something, I ask about it. That's normal. Nothing about this is normal, Meghan said, her voice shaking now. Either with anger or something else, it was hard to tell. The audience started murmuring. Some people looked shocked. Others looked angry. Jonathan raised his hands, trying to calm things down. Meghan, I think maybe we should take a breath here, he said. Don't tell me what to do, she shot back. I'm so sick of British men telling me what to do. I'm not telling you what to do, Jonathan said, his patience clearly running thin. I'm trying to have a civil conversation, which is becoming increasingly difficult. Meghan grabbed her microphone and pulled it off. You know what? I don't need this. I came here thinking we could have a real conversation, but this is just more of the same garbage. You're the one who's been hostile from the moment you sat down, Jonathan said, his voice rising now. He was done being polite. I welcomed you warmly. I asked you fair questions. And you've done nothing but insult me. Insult this show. Insult this country. I'm insulting the things that deserve to be insulted, Meghan fired back. No, Jonathan said firmly. You're being rude and disrespectful. And frankly, I've had enough. The audience erupted. Some people clapped. Others booed. It was chaos. Meghan pointed at Jonathan. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment a woman stands up for herself, she's called rude. She's called difficult. This has nothing to do with you being a woman, Jonathan said loudly over the noise of the audience. This has to do with you being a guest on my show and treating me like dirt. Your show? Meghan laughed that harsh laugh again. Your show is a joke, Jonathan. You're a joke. This whole country is a joke. The audience lost it completely. People were shouting. Some were standing up. Jonathan's face went red. Right, he said, his voice cold now. That's it. Get off my stage. Excuse me? Meghan looked genuinely shocked. You heard me, Jonathan said. Get off my stage. This interview is over. You can't kick me off, Meghan said, but she sounded less confident now. It's my show, Jonathan said, and I absolutely can. You've insulted me. You've insulted my audience. You've insulted an entire nation. I don't care who you are or who you married. You're done here. Meghan stood there for a moment, looking like she couldn't believe what was happening. The cameras were still rolling. Millions of people were watching this unfold live. Fine, she said finally. I didn't want to be here anyway. Clearly, Jonathan said. Meghan turned to walk off, but then she stopped and turned back. You'll regret this, Jonathan. The only thing I regret, Jonathan said, is wasting 20 minutes of my life on someone who has no respect for anyone but herself. The audience cheered. Actually cheered. Meghan's face went pale, then red. She opened her mouth to say something else, but Jonathan held up his hand. Please leave, he said simply. Now. A producer rushed onto the stage, trying to guide Meghan away. She shrugged off the helping hand and stormed off on her own, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. You could hear her even over the noise of the audience. Jonathan stood there for a moment, watching her go. Then he turned to the camera and the audience. His professional smile came back, but you could see he was shaken. Well, he said, running a hand through his hair, that was unexpected. The audience laughed, a release of all the tension that had been building. Jonathan sat back down in his chair. I've been doing this job for a long time, he said to the camera, and I've interviewed thousands of people, Actors, musicians, politicians, royals. I've always tried to be fair. I've always tried to be respectful. And I've always believed that everyone deserves to be heard. He paused, looking directly into the lens. But respect goes both ways, he continued. You can't come onto someone's show, into someone's country, and expect to be treated well when you're treating everyone around you with contempt. It doesn't work that way. The audience applauded again. Jonathan nodded his thanks. I asked simple questions, he went on, about her life, about her experiences. And instead of answers, I got attacks. Instead of conversation, I got insults. And when I tried to push back, even gently, I was accused of being condescending, of being part of some conspiracy. He shook his head, looking tired. You know, the irony is not lost on me, Jonathan continued. She came on this show to talk about how badly she's been treated, how everyone has been so unfair to her. And then she proceeds to treat me, my audience, and this entire country with complete disrespect. Do you see the contradiction there? People in the audience nodded and murmured in agreement. And when I simply asked her to back up her claims, to provide some context, to engage in an actual dialogue, I became the enemy, Jonathan said. I became part of this vast conspiracy against her, because apparently, asking questions is now an attack. He walked across the stage, something he rarely did during a show. Here's what I think, he said, turning back to face the audience. I think some people get so used to being agreed with, so used to everyone walking on eggshells around them, that they forget how to have a normal conversation. They forget that other people have opinions too, that other people have the right to question and to disagree. The applause was building again. And when they finally encounter someone who won't just nod along, who won't just accept everything they say without question, they don't know how to handle it, Jonathan continued. So they lash out. They play the victim. They accuse you of all sorts of terrible things. Anything to avoid actually addressing the questions being asked. I stand by every question I asked, Jonathan said. They were fair. They were reasonable. And they were asked with respect. The fact that they were met with such hostility says more about the person answering than it does about me. Another round of applause. People in the audience were nodding. I've built my career on being fair, Jonathan said, his voice carrying weight now, on giving people a platform to tell their story. I've had people on this show who've been through terrible things, real trauma, real hardship. And you know what? They managed to talk about it without attacking me, without insulting an entire nation, without playing the victim while simultaneously acting superior to everyone else. He paused, letting that sink in. Because here's the thing about real victims, Jonathan continued. They don't weaponize their pain. They don't use it as an excuse to be cruel to others. They don't demand sympathy while giving none in return. The audience was hanging on every word. What I witnessed tonight was not someone who's been victimized, Jonathan said carefully. What I witnessed was someone who's learned that playing the victim gets them attention, gets them sympathy, gets them exactly what they want, until it doesn't. Until someone says, hang on, let's actually examine this. And then suddenly, you're the villain. More applause. Louder this time. Now, I know this is going to be talked about, Jonathan said. I know people will have opinions. Some will say I should have let her speak. Some will say I was right to end it. But here's what I know. I have a responsibility to this audience, to the people watching at home, and to myself. And that responsibility includes not allowing my show to become a platform for someone to spew hatred and disrespect. The applause was louder now, longer. Jonathan waited for it to die down. I don't care if you're a duchess or a dustman, he said. If you come on this show, you treat people with respect. That's the rule. It's always been the rule. And it always will be. He looked at his notes, then back up at the audience. You know what the funny thing is? He said. Before she came out, We had this whole segment planned. Fun questions, lighthearted stories, maybe a game or two. I wanted this to be enjoyable for her and for all of you. I really did. He tapped his cards against the desk. But from the moment she sat down, there was this attitude, Jonathan continued, this sense of superiority, like she was doing us a favor by being here. And maybe she thought she was. Maybe in her world, people are grateful just to be in her presence. The audience murmured in agreement. But that's not how it works here, Jonathan said. We don't bow and scrape just because someone has a title or fame or money. We judge people by how they treat others, by their character, by their kindness. And on those measures, well, you all saw what I saw. He stood up again, straightening his jacket. I've never kicked a guest off this show before, he said quietly. Never. Not in all my years of doing this. I've had people I disagreed with. I've had people who were difficult. But I've always found a way to make it work, to find common ground, to have a conversation. He looked toward where Meghan had exited. But tonight was different, he said. Tonight, I had someone who didn't want a conversation, who wanted a platform to attack and demean. And I couldn't, in good conscience, give that to her. The audience stood up, clapping. Jonathan looked genuinely moved by the response. Thank you, he said. Really. Thank you for understanding. I hope I made the right call. You did, someone shouted from the audience. Others echoed it. Jonathan smiled, a real smile this time. Well, I suppose we should get on with the show, shouldn't we? We've got a brilliant band coming up, and a comedian who I promise you is much nicer than our previous guest. That got a huge laugh. The tension was finally breaking. People were relaxing again. Before we go to break, Jonathan said, I just want to say one more thing. To anyone watching who might be going through a tough time, who might feel like the world is against them, I understand that life can be hard, that people can be cruel, that sometimes you feel alone. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But here's the thing, he continued. How you respond to that hardship, how you treat people when you're struggling, that's what defines you. You can either become bitter and lash out at everyone around you, or you can choose to rise above it, to be better, to be kind, even when kindness isn't shown to you. The studio was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. People were listening, really listening. What I saw tonight, Jonathan said, was someone who chose bitterness, who chose to blame everyone else for her problems, who chose to see enemies everywhere instead of taking responsibility for her own choices and actions. He looked directly at the camera again. Don't be that person, he said simply. Whatever you're going through, whatever pain you're carrying, don't let it turn you into someone who spreads more pain. The world has enough of that already. The applause started again, slower this time, but no less sincere. Jonathan nodded his appreciation. Right, he said, clapping his hands together. Enough seriousness. We've got a show to do. When we come back, we've got music, we've got laughs, and I promise no more drama. Well, unless our band decides to have a meltdown. But they seem lovely, so I think we're safe. The audience laughed. The cameras cut away for the commercial break. But in that studio, in that moment, something had shifted. Everyone there had witnessed something they would talk about for years. A moment when someone's true character was revealed, when the mask slipped completely away. Jonathan sat back in his chair during the break, letting out a long breath. His producers rushed over, asking if he was okay, if he needed anything. He waved them off with a smile. I'm fine, he said, honestly. Just glad that's over. But as the makeup artist touched up his face for the next segment, as the audience chattered excitedly among themselves, as the story began spreading across social media at lightning speed, everyone knew this wasn't over. Not really. This was the moment that would define how people saw Meghan Markle. Not her wedding, not her speeches, not her carefully crafted interviews. This unscripted, unfiltered moment where she couldn't control the narrative or edit the footage. And Jonathan Ross, he became the hero of the night. The man who stood up to entitlement. The man who refused to be bullied or manipulated. The man who said what millions were thinking but were too polite to say. The show went on. The band played beautifully. The comedian had everyone in stitches. And Jonathan was his charming, professional self for the rest of the evening. But everyone knew what the real story was. Everyone knew what clip would be played over and over. In the control room, the director was already on the phone with the network executives. They knew they had something explosive, something that would be analyzed and discussed and debated for months, maybe years. But more than that, they had a moment of truth. A moment when someone who had spent so long crafting a public image, playing the victim, claiming the moral high ground, showed everyone who she really was. And she had done it to herself. Jonathan had simply asked questions and defended himself when attacked. Everything else was on her. As the show wrapped up and the audience filed out, buzzing with excitement about what they had witnessed, as the crew began packing up the equipment, as Jonathan finally removed his microphone and headed to his dressing room, one thing was absolutely clear. In 38 seconds, everything had changed. A career built on sympathy and victimhood had come crashing down. Not because of some conspiracy or media attack or institutional racism, but because when given a platform, when given the chance to show grace and wisdom and maturity, Meghan Markle had instead shown the world exactly who she was. And Jonathan Ross had made sure everyone saw